Hello, Christian Metal community. My name is Jimmy Searles, and I'm with the Christian Metal group, and we have Jay Goodwin.
That's right. I'm also with the Christian Metal Group. We are part of the leadership team. And as I've said in other interviews, we spend all day deleting comments. It's great.
That's right. Well, today, today we are excited to have Seth Metoyer on with us today, and he is involved in a lot of stuff as we'll get into. So the first question we like to ask Seth is, did you grow up in a religious home?
Hey guys, thanks for having me on. Big fan. To answer your first question, I did grow up in a religious surrounding, a religious family. My parents were born again Christians, as they called it. Went to church for a while. Was raised, going to church, and at the end of about, I don't know, maybe 12 years old or a little older, we sort of stopped going because as many things happen, churches rub people the wrong way. And that one did my parents, but we still did a lot of teaching tapes from Pastor Bob. That was a big thing when I was a younger teenager, and listened to a lot of Christian metal. So I was raised in a religious Christian home.
That's great stuff. The next question I want to ask is, did you grow up in a musical home?
Absolutely. I grew up with Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, The Cars, some bands like Yes, and my parents were very big Beatles fans. My mom was a huge Michael Jackson fan, and Lionel Richie fan. So I grew up with a lot of stuff like that from the 70s. I was born in the early 70s, so my younger years were filled with like cool rock and roll stuff. Jimi Hendrix, which he actually happens to be eighth cousin removed from on my mother's side from me. So like to think that maybe I got some musical influences from the guy. But yes, music was a very, very big part of my childhood. As I mentioned earlier, listened to a lot of Christian rock and metal as well. Got into, Bloodgood, Barren Cross, all those guys really young, Striper. And then it evolved into bands like, Vengeance, Mortification, Tourniquet, Deliverance. Those are, real big influences on me still. So, but yeah, I was fortunate to grow up in a house that had a lot of musical influences.
Okay. So you have a lot of history in music and metal music and Christian music. You've done a lot of different things. So give us a brief history of how you got into music and then into metal music and Christian music. What's your story with that?
Yeah, I got into the music side myself, just pretty much, being raised, as we mentioned before, around music. And I was just really, obviously into it. And from an early age, I did the whole like to play air guitar in the room, air drums in the room. I thought, and early on, actually, in my lifetime, my brother and I, Chris, who some of you might know is the bassist for Mangled Carpenter. Anyways, we came up with that name, Mangled Carpenter, way back in the day, like when we were like 14 or 15. We were listening to, Christian metal, and we saw that in one of the tapes we had, Haven, the band Haven, that had their address to write them. And so we did the snail mail writing, and we wrote to these guys, and we said, we had a list of names that we thought would be cool if we were ever in a band, and so we wanted to kind of pretend to be a band and sort of fake it till you make it or get around to it. And anyways, I can't remember all the band names that we had listed. There were probably some silly ones, but they wrote back, and they I don't remember who it was that wrote us back, but it was one of the guys in the band, and said, this Mangled Carpenter is a cool name. And, we kind of explained, what our vision was as far as the idea, Jesus being a carpenter, and then he was mangled on the cross. And it just sounded cool, and just one of those things in your mind that you knew there was something there. So but then years later, I never picked up an instrument except for an old guitar that my dad found on the side of the street one time in a dump or something, and by a trash can. It was an acoustic guitar, and it had a fret was kind of broken, but I played around with that when I was younger for a long time. But then I didn't actually get into actually playing a guitar until I was probably almost 30 years old. I remember living in Nashville and getting a tax return, a very small tax return. And I went to Guitar Center in Nashville, and I looked around for a black, cheap kind of guitar. And there was an ESP LTD, which I actually played on the first Mangled Carpenter album, and also on the second Mangled Carpenter album, along with another guitar of mine, my Les Paul. But this guitar I still have, and it was like $120 and came with a little amp, and it was really cool. And I remember just kind of starting playing around with it. So then what happened was I ended up getting a divorce and moving eventually to Connecticut, where my brother Chris was, around 2005, and had the guitar, and we had an old laptop, and we also decided that we were going to do some Mangled Carpenter stuff. So we wanted to do a demo, and we did one called First Offering. It was literally on this old Dell laptop, plugged the microphone just straight into the in jack. So I had Acid Pro program for recording. I had my guitar. I had a pedal. The distortion pedal I had is the death metal pedal from Digitech, and that the First Offering can be found on SoundCloud. Still, I think we actually uploaded that as a MySpace kind of release, and we've had people come to us and actually mention that they'd heard the demo, the First Offering demo, which has a song we actually put on the newest album that we did with Jason Wisdom from Becoming the Archetype, called Spit Parade. We actually did the demo version of that one back in 2005. It was raw. It was actually Chris, my brother, actually did a lot of the vocals on that. We kind of mixed vocal switching, but it was a cool experience, and it was the first thing we did. And we designed some CDs because I was working in the music industry, and printed a few. And actually, Zach Plunkett of Abated Mass of Flesh, he had told me recently in an interview I did with him for Heaven's Metal magazine that Mangled Carpenter, he heard that album back in MySpace around 2005, 2006, and said that it was a big inspiration to him starting Abated Mass of Flesh. And he actually initially said that the music kind of freaked him out because, it was a Christian release, and we had actually used a song sample from one of the horror movies called Scream. And so that was interesting. But yeah, we had a lot of fun doing that. And so that was put on, after that was put on hiatus for quite a few years when I moved to, when I was, working in the music industry. Previously to that, I was working at Rugged Records, Sony Music, and we'll get to that in a bit, Essential Records. But it wasn't until 2005 that we started doing some music. But then I took another U-turn and kind of moved to Montana, where I'm from originally, and ended up coming to not Redondo. I went to Redondo Beach when I was out of high school to go to Sanctuary International with Pastor Bob, and then I lived with Pastor Bob for a while in Nashville. And like you said, I've been around a lot, did a lot of things, but musically I took a break from that until about 2010 or 11, and that's when we decided to start Mangled Carpenter again and record that. So that's quick, not so quick answer as to how I progressed into music.
Right. So as you said, and as we've said, you have so many projects. I think one thing I'm really interested in is art. So outside of music, you do a lot of artwork. And then on that note, also, um, you seem to have taken a great interest in horror overall, the horror genre, whether it be movies, whether it be imagery. Um, so let's talk about horror also. So the related question is, um, we know that people in Christianity, when it comes to horror, like tend to gravitate towards the death metal genre. So what got you into extreme metal, and how do you use horror to teach spiritual principles?
Oh yes, as for the art, I got into art at a young age, drawing, painting traditional stuff. As I got old, I always liked the kind of creepy, covers like the Mortification cover or the first one. When Vengeance Rising came out, they had that hand, Pastor Bob's hand with the hidden nail through it, just always thought that was cool. And then added with the kind of like the Vengeance stuff. I mean, I was introduced to heavy music, unlike most people were introduced to heavy music. They came from, secular stuff. But for me, I was introduced to heavy music through Christian metal. So when I heard Vengeance or I heard Mortification, I was just like, what's this? And the imagery was dark. And I actually started looking into the dark imagery as far as like, the kind of more brutal things that happened in the Bible. And it thought that some of those, songs and lyrics and visuals were just really cool. And they could, you could talk about some of this stuff that people, I guess, kind of don't focus on or found uncomfortable. And, but it really resonated with me. And growing up, my dad let us watch, horror films. I mean, I think the first horror film I saw was like Terror Train in 1980, and I was a little kid. It was on TV in the morning. I flipped it on, and there it was, some guy running around with an axe, and I was like, "Oh, what's this?" And it kind of freaked me out, but it also intrigued me. I'm like, "Why is this scary person chasing this other person?" And what, at a young age, started thinking, what is that? Why, it seems like there's evil and there's good, and did this person do something wrong, and why is this person so mad? And then later, movies like um, um, Friday the 13th, Freddy Krueger stuff, Nightmare on Elm Street, American Werewolf in London, those were big ones for me. And me and my friends in high school, like a lot of us in the 80s, were just like, thought Jason was cool. And, and then Alice Cooper did the Man Behind the Mask song. And, and it was just, I had a poster of Alice Cooper and Jason behind my door, and it was just cool. And my parents didn't really know it was there because they would never look behind my door. And so anyways, that's sort of where my horror stuff came in. And I think that, as I got older, I ended up getting sick in the hospital in about 2009 and went into a coma and barely lived. I had a really bad case of pneumonia and bleeding in my lungs. So when I woke up from the coma, it was weird because there were certain things that you don't think of. That one of the things I remember thinking is I didn't want to die because I wanted to see Star Wars trilogy one more time. You think of these really weird things. And I remember also thinking that something that was so important to my childhood that I bonded with my dad over and my brothers was film and horror films. And so I thought, you know what, I think I might start looking into doing some things like, I opened up a website called morehorror.com. Now it's morehorrormovies.com, where I could just upload thoughts on movies, do some reviews. And I connected with the horror movie industry and met a lot of really cool people. And there are actually a lot of really good, cool Christians that I met. One of them's name is Bill Oberst Jr., and this guy's a wonderful actor. He's done a lot of horror films. And I mean, probably one of the smartest theological Christians I've ever met or talked to. You guys should connect with him sometime if you ever want to look at his stuff, Bill Oberst Jr. But so I got involved in that. then started producing, getting involved and helping people market and do PR stuff for their films, these indie films. On my IMDb page under Seth Metoyer, you can see a list of films that I've worked on as a producer, and also composed like 4 feature films now. And it's just something about the community and something about helping those people get their visions made. It's very indie, no budget most of the time. A lot of people working their butts off, telling these stories. And the interesting thing about horror to me has always been that it's similar to the Bible in many ways. The Bible has horrific things that happen, horror type stories, and then there's good. And I always thought that idea of the good battling, the evil. And that's what a lot of stuff, even though some of the killers come back again, I mean, how is that any different when you vanquish Satan in your life or a sin in your life? It always kind of tries to come back, and you got to all over again fight these things. And I just feels like it was sort of a spiritual battle thing. And the way that I also look at it from a Christian perspective or a Christ-focused perspective is that in several films that I produced recently, a horror film called Chum about this shark who is in the future. Sharks aren't around anymore, so then somebody develops this shark that can walk on land. Cheesy, right? But we got a Glee song in that movie. Another film that I have called Blood Harvest that I actually co-wrote several years ago. We finally got that made, and I got a song from Brain Matter in that, one of my albums. Got a song from Grave Robber in that, in a pretty important place, even the closing credits. So that was really cool. And so another film that I just finished working on, I got a Pulpit Vomit song in during a car drive. So my goal has always sort of been to try to get representation of our music or Christian music into these arenas. And if somebody ever tracks down, looks at the credits and, well, who's this band Glay or Brain Matter? That was a cool song. Grave Robber, who are these guys? It opens doors for God to use however he wishes. So that's my angle on the horror stuff. And as far as the horror art, of course, and the death metal stuff, it's just the same thing. There's visuals. There's for some reason, I've just been a creative guy who loved the visuals, who kind of always empathizes with some forms of monsters who are misunderstood, say like Frankenstein. Frankenstein's monster, and then there's other monsters where you're just like, wow, we need this guy is interesting, but what makes him tick? Why does he act like this? Is there a reason? It's not about glorification of horrific things. It's actually about a whole other thing that's interested me about the human nature, human psyche. Visuals, I've just always been interested in them. Alice Cooper shirt. Alice is a zombie with his eyeball hanging out. I don't know. I'm sure that for some people, and I get it, that's just grosses them out. They think it's weird or evil, but I've never seen it that way. And but if it causes somebody to not feel right or feel well, or confuses them, it feels strange to them, don't watch horror. Don't listen to death metal, even Christian death metal. We get flamed for a lot of the stuff like Mangled Carpenter, the name even, and visuals and the lyrics, but they're all Bible based on that album, on that project. And so that's how I started with the art, got into horror, and where I'm at now.
And on that note, tell us about your experience with Sony Music and then your more horror film company. Tell us about that and what are the details with it?
Yeah, the Sony Music I worked for, Sony BMG, that was when I worked at Provident Music, Essential Records, Reunion Records. Those were owned by Sony Music Group, and there were also some secular stuff that came through there. I designed graphics back then, back in about 2002. I designed stuff for Michael W. Smith, Jars of Clay, Plum, Third Day, and then worked with bands like Pillar and POD, Chevelle. So that was all really cool, a really cool experience. The Christian music industry, CCM, the more corporate world, um, it liked my out of the box thinking. They brought me in saying they want the wow factor. Before that, I worked at Rugged Records and designed the CD by God from Disciple. Worked on Wyrick stuff over there, and did their website. But that's before, and kind of got me the experience to move into the other stuff, the Christian corporate world. They wanted this wow factor, they said, and I gave it to them. And what they don't realize with the wow factor and thinking outside the box and being different, a neurodivergent person, my mind works differently. They don't realize that what comes with that is a whole other aspect of just the way I operate and work. I like to work. I work like an artist. Sometimes I'm motivated to do this here and not this. I'll do this here. I'm always multitasking. But so it'd be like I would get into the office and maybe I'd show up a little later than other people, which is fine in a lot of companies that are flex. And then I'd stay late, finish things up, or I'd work on the weekends. And always meet my deadlines. And at the end of the day, it was fun, great experience. But it was just like, I don't know, sort of like going to a kind of a modern, button-up tie kind of church. I just never fit in there, and I don't really fit in around. Sorry, the camera shook. I don't really fit in around people like that. That for the most part, I've just always fit more around metalheads or just different people, and but it's all good. And so that was my experience there. For the more horror movie company that I have, it's basically what I do use for PR, marketing, sharing films, and then also producing my production of horror films. So it's just under that banner. I've owned the name Atmore Horror for years. My Instagram handle is Atmore Horror. It's considered an influencer account with about 67,000 followers. So I use that, and I also use that to add my music from my label and my bands, to stories, to posts. It'll get some traffic for our Spotify streams, and so it's been cool to implement that in there as well. So that is the story on those two things.
All right. Also, let's talk about Broken Curfew Records. Like, what influenced you to start a record label? What kind of art are you most interested in putting out through that label? And what's next for the label?
For Broken Curfew Records, my vision and reason I started that was basically I wanted a place to have a little more control over the way that I released my own music, where we had Mangled, Carpenter, Brain Matter, and Pulpit Vomit. And those were my three projects, that I wanted to have a little more control over. We signed with Karen Collective with a Brain Matter. We released through them, and a couple Pulpit Vomit songs. And then Mangled Carpenter's first album was on Hagar Recordings, which is Rottweiler Records. But I figured the thing was I was putting a lot of time and marketing into my own stuff. And so I always felt that, well, if I'm going to put this much time into the designing videos, art, marketing, PR, emailing stuff to radio, all this stuff, I thought, why don't I just do what I wanted for a long time? My brother and I wanted to start Broken Curfew Records, or a record label, and we decided on that name. So that was where it started, moved over our stuff over there. And then started thinking that I also, in addition to that, have helped a lot of bands. I help a lot of bands market their stuff, share it through different outlets like my personal stuff, or Metal Crawl Space, or Heaven's Metal, all this. So I started thinking, well, I'm doing all that for nothing anyways, for the most part. So why don't I try to bring some bands over, and then when I help them out, they'll also be on my label. And maybe make it something where we're just like this family, And that's what we did. The vision of that has tended to be, since I'm work within the business of the Christian music industry mostly, to sign bands that were interested in being on a label that is mostly, faith-based, but it's not 100% faith-based. There's a couple releases that are, not necessarily faith-based, might have Christians in a band. We all love that debate. Might be album that's not totally focused on, say, the gospel or something, and so they want to implement their music into a whole more secular type realm, hopefully, and I think that's fine too. I think it's all about heart, about what they're saying. Nothing blasphemous, no bunch of cursing. We don't sign anything like that, but nothing that promotes hatred or anything like that. So, but that's where the label is and where it's going. We grew a lot faster than I thought we were going to over the last couple years. We have about 20 bands now. I thought was going to only stick to about 10. Things get a little more expensive when you go beyond a certain level. There's challenges with running a label today. It's nobody gets paid anything. Any money that is made goes back into the record label, goes back into marketing. And after, like, for say Bandcamp, after you hit 20 bands, a monthly fee goes from $20 a month to $50 a month to have more than 20 bands on Bandcamp label account. Spotify, after you hit 20 bands that you're distributing through there, jumps from about $240 a year to $640. So that's a huge jump. And so you get to the point of starting to weigh, I already put my own money into this. Bands already get their small amount of splits, which is really not anything. And so you start to go, well, am I at a place where we can continue to grow more at this point? Do we find people to potentially invest in trying to help us out here? Those are all on the table. So at the end of the day, I'm liking where we're at now. And if we do sign bands, it's usually, my approach is I sign bands that I like to listen to and that I believe in. And that's the best way to do it for me. And then we hope other people like it. But so I need to be invested in the band. And that's the future of Broken Curfew record looks like. However, God tends to decide he wants this to mature or move forward, because like I said, I didn't have any idea that we would kind of grow as fast as we did or get as many bands that wanted to work with us. So that's been cool. It's kind of, it can be a little overwhelming on top of the other things I do, but it's important to me. So I'll keep doing it, and we'll keep doing it till the foreseeable future.
Tell us about Metoyer Media and Cross-Spaced Metal. How did those come about, and what are they? What's their purpose?
Metoyer Media is my production company where I technically run my audio mixing and mastering, my composing, my graphic stuff. So that's just basically the entity I use it for business purposes. As far as the Metal Crawl Space, that was something that was designed to help, promote music. It was help to start, posting news and getting interaction. That's always a good way to build, a site, our brand. And so Metal Crawl Space came to the mind, where we wanted to, my brother Chris and I, again, we wanted to put into, play like this. We want to talk about certain music. Let's do that. Let's share things about music, secular and Christian. And it's a cool name. People seem to like it. So that's basically what it's turned out to be. And I try to keep that updated, but mostly it's for, promoting bands and helping share some things around. And it's fun, but it's one of those things that are kind of sits on the back burner, get some reshares, but was the idea behind that.
All right, so of course you have a couple of bands now. What got you started with playing instruments? How many instruments do you play? And Of course, we talked about death metal already. So let's talk about these bands, Mangled, Carpenter, especially, and also um, Brain Matter, but
Yeah,
especially
and
Mangled Carpenter. Mangled Carpenter is a very. It reminds me of, like, I guess some of the old school Christian death metal bands, and a lot of them, whether it be band names or songs. I mean, when I looked at Mangled Carpenter, it reminded me of the Mortification song "Butchered Mutilation." So yeah, that's it's a great name. It says death metal, but it also says Christian death metal, even in the name.
that's
Um,
right.
so, and on that note, um, obviously I've heard some of the music. I've bought some of the music from you directly, um, pushing the envelope of extreme metal, and then also it's kind of keeping it um, kind of old school. It kind of reminds me of maybe a heavier version of like 6 Feet Under when it comes to extremity. Trying to think of some of the other bands like maybe Carcass but it's more than that. Oh, Mortician. There we go. Mangled Carpenter reminds me a lot of Mortician. So yeah, let's talk about that in depth.
Oh wow. Also, tell us about Pulpit Vomit. How did that come about? And what if somebody's never heard this band? What are they in for? What are they going to get?
Yes, Pulpit Vomit is an amazing band name.
Well, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, I started playing guitar in about 2000 and 2002 maybe, and did the Mangled Carpenter stuff. And yes, Mangled Carpenter was supposed to be very extreme. At the time, I was discovering some secular bands that I really liked, like Bolt Thrower, Bloodbath, Mortician, as you mentioned. A lot of this old stuff, and of course, grew up a fan of Vengeance and Vengeance Rising. And when I sing, I kind of, and I kind of have like when I do Mangled Carpenter, there's some influences of Roger Martinez in there, and I think you also mentioned 6 Feet Deep. I get compared to that vocalist sometimes too, so it might be what you were hearing. So that's basically what we wanted to do with Mangled Carpenter, was just let's be brutal, let's be extremely heavy. There's bands out there that it's interesting because a lot of people in the Christian industry, even the heavy music industry, haven't really even heard of bands like Cattle Decapitation, Infant Annihilator, all these kind of like, Aborted, all these kind of like extreme bands that are on the, this cusp of just extremity. And it's like Christian music when I was younger was supposed to be something that would be an alternative for other people to listen to. You've got these bands who have 500,000 to 1,000,000 streams on their stuff, maybe even more on some of them, and there's a huge fan base out there. And so what we found interesting about Mangled Carpenter is we found that nobody actually in the secular market, which is probably 90% of our fans for Mangled Carpenter, actually, they don't even care at all that the lyrics are Bible based and Christian, because we don't really carry ourselves like this. Some people like this, we're too good for you, or we're judging you, we're shoving this down your throat. No, we're like, hey, this stuff should relate to you. There's some really cool stories in the Bible. Our music is heavy. We don't act super preachy. We're not going to tell you what to do, not going to tell you what to believe, but we're around if you want to discuss it. I've always rolled that way, and it's always worked. I've always gotten along with non-Christians more than I do most Christians anyways. So it just came natural to what I wanted to do, and it's been really cool to see God just do what he planned to do with it, wants to do with it. In all honesty, with the music that I do, I make music I want to listen to. I always kind of have. So the Mangled Carpenter stuff is stuff I always wanted to hear and wanted to listen to, and still I actually, enjoy listening to my albums because I wrote them mostly for me, and obviously for a community that wants to embrace it if they do, or want to listen to it if you're in a secular people want to check it out. The imagery had to be a certain way, obviously, with the kind of creepy brutality stuff. It's been going pretty well. And so that's kind of how Mangled Carpenter progressed, and not exactly sure where we're going next with it. But that's it's just waiting to see. It's weird being a creative person, and you guys probably know this too. You just, it's the timing. Sometimes it's a good time for things, sometimes things just unfold. You can't really totally plan everything, so I'm excited to see what's next on all of that.
So I recently got to join the Heaven's Metal staff writer, and I know you've been doing that for a while. Tell us, how did that evolve? How did you get in touch with Doug Van Pelt to start that journey, and also Metal Digest? I know you're a staff writer with that. You've got your hands in a lot of things, and that's awesome. You're doing a lot for the Christian metal space there.
As far as Heaven's Metal goes, what was really cool is, like, I have a cool backstory. When I was younger, I read Heaven's Metal, of course, and then when I got a little older, I was living at Pastor Bob's in Tennessee and working for Rugged Records, and Doug Van Pelt had come to visit Bob's to watch a Disciple showcase back in about 1999, 2000. And I remember being a graphic designer trying to get my foot in the door, and this was before, when I first moved there, and I wasn't even in the industry designing graphics yet, but I was a graphic designer on the side. And so I designed this mock-up cover for Sanctuary magazine, and had Marilyn Manson on the cover of it, and I designed this whole mock cover, and I went to the bedroom that Doug was staying in, and I set it up on a little side thingy where he could come in and see it when he came in there. I was pretty, fairly young, in my mid 20s. So I don't know why I didn't just approach the guy and be like, hey, I'm a graphic designer, have any maybe work I could do, freelance stuff. And anyways, I put it in there hoping, I guess, he'd see it and ask who did this, sort of dumb. And but at the end of the day, I talked to him recently about that. He said he doesn't remember that. Of course, I didn't think he really would. So anyways, years later, obviously this last year, I had, talked to Lloyd Harp from Indie Vision Music and Heaven's Metal, and we just chatted a lot about some things, and he did an interview with me, and then we just for Indie Vision Music, and then we just kind of started chatting about a lot of things, and he thought some of my ideas were interesting and my writing style, so he just told Doug that there was a guy that might be interested in writing, and I was, and started writing for Heaven's Metal, and we just kind of clicked. It took off, and now I'm the assistant editor over there, helping with some of that stuff, and writing, and then writing for Metal Digest. Metal Digest actually did some stories on my solo music. They covered my solo Seth Metoyer album, Through the Vanishing Point. It's rock metal stuff, and I love that early 2000s kind of new metal, alt metal stuff. Stained, Breaking Benjamin, Chevelle, those guys, was really into those kinds of bands. So I wanted to write something that captured that for me, that I've always wanted to do, and they really liked that. So they did an interview with me, talked about the album, talked about my music composing, and all the stuff we've been talking about. And then, so one day I was just like, they were like, we're hiring writers if you ever want to do some reviews, some quick reviews. I was like, well, okay, I can fit that in. And so that's been a cool thing. And, I've been doing a lot of the secular reviews, but I'm also going to start working in some Christian metal reviews, which will be cool too. So that's how that came about. And it's been pretty cool and exciting.
Right. So because of all the work that you're doing with graphics, with studio work, engineering, writing, and everything else, do Do you get out and play live any?
Yeah, with all the things that I do like the, production, engineering, writing, art, film composing, all things like that. I don't actually get out to do anything live. I'm also a little older now. Kind of, the whole, hips starting to hurt thing. I also have, I have some health issues, like I have, high blood pressure. I have to watch just things that happen when you get older. I have actually an aneurysm in my near my heart, aortic aneurysm that they keep an eye on. So some of that stuff, I mean, I feel good, I'm healthy, I can move around and do things, but going around on stage, jumping around, overexerting myself, it's probably not the best idea. But some of the stuff that I do, like more ambient and just some of the stuff I could do on a keyboard, or some of my solo stuff I could take and do local shows probably if I was just chilling or something, but that hasn't happened. So, but mostly the answer is no, I do not get around to do live stuff.
That's great. Tell us about one thing about Seth that fans watching this may not know.
Something about me that fans might not know. Well, one thing I suppose that some do and some don't is that I am a twin. And my twin brother is Chris Olsen. And, we've been best friends since we're kids, and we do a lot of the things together. That's why he's the bass player, and he's the idea behind Brain Matter. His idea to do an industrial project with his vision of lyrics, and so that was pretty cool. And so yeah, and that would mean that my name Seth Metoyer is a pseudonym. So, but if anybody wants to know how I got that pseudonym picked, they can ask me, or we can do another video about it. It's top secret, not really.
That's amazing. It's always great to find out new things about people, for sure. On that note, what is your favorite thing about being a Christian?
My favorite thing about being a Christian, well, I think that what's interesting over the years is that I've found that I don't necessarily like the religion of Christianity, if you know what I mean. I'm sure you guys have run into just a lot of the issues with things in the church, comments that you have to delete all the time, people arguing over things. But at the end of the day, I think my favorite thing about Christianity and being is what it's supposed to be, is focusing on what Jesus taught us. He's the biggest example of what we should strive to be, how to act, how to treat people. We're supposed to just laid out for us what's important for us if we want to say that we're followers of Christ. And it was love your neighbor, and it was feed the poor, help the destitute, love your neighbor, bring peace, try to understand that when Jesus was praying to his Father and how they were one, and he was saying that he wanted his Father to see us the same way and love us the same way, and he does that, and we become one with him. And so I've always found it kind of interesting and cool. My favorite thing is that people are always searching possibly for the kingdom of God. Where is it? Well, it's within us, because we and God are one. We're together as a unit, a loving unit, as the kingdom of God is inside us with the Spirit. And so we can apply all of those characteristics that God stands for, that Jesus taught about how to be and treat people, how to make the next right decision, how to help people, how to show empathy, and just try to be a peaceful person. And so I think my favorite thing about all of that is when I run into some people that actually follow those same characteristics. And try not to get too frustrated with the fact that not a lot of Christians and Christianity are very good representatives of that. But that's always been a challenge, and it always will be. So we can only focus on ourselves, as Philippians 2:12 says, that we all need to work out our own salvation with fear and trembling. And so it's a personal journey for everyone. And let's let people seek and search and find God, and that's, I think, the whole idea of what to me is my favorite thing about Christianity when I think about it.
Wow. So what can the Christian metal community do to support Seth in all of your projects, all the things you write for, your production, your record label, all of your bands? How can we help support you?
For support, this things like this really help support, people going to Bandcamp and paying $1.50 for a song, paying for a digital CD or a regular CD. I mean, that helps spread the word. That helps our bands feel like they're not just throwing their stuff out into the void. No one's making any money. It's not too expensive to put down some. I know a lot of Christians like to support music, so they do spend some money, which is awesome. There's a lot of bands they support, and that's a way to continue to do it. But mostly just share things, add our music to playlists. Share and like stories that we post. Read articles that we actually read the articles we post on Heaven's Metal magazine, and chime in, give your opinion, just the support that way, just being involved and communicating and interacting and sharing things around, helping financially if they can, referring me as a graphic designer to somebody, or an audio engineer to somebody. Send them to my website, SethMetoyer.com, send them to BrokenCurfewRecords.com and HeavensMetalMagazine.com, stuff like that. It's just whatever you can do, whatever anybody can do is much appreciated.
Yeah, so on that note, like we love what you're doing. We appreciate you. I think that Christian metal as a whole definitely takes all of us doing different things, and some of us doing everything. But in order to survive, in order to thrive, in order to keep the message going out, it really does take all of us in some way. So we appreciate your contributions to metal, appreciate your contributions even to horror, and and whatever else that you're doing.
Perfect. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. This has been great.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate you guys and your kind words and your support. It's been cool. I love what I do, and I try not to get burnt out. Every once in a while, I'll go through a phase where I'm just like, what's happening? But it's kind of like how I like to operate. And as long as I can keep doing it, I'll keep doing it. And I appreciate you guys having me on here. And I'll continue to support the Christian metal group. I love what you guys are doing. Keep it up. I know how things can be frustrating. I know how things can be underappreciated. Don't get too discouraged for things. I know things are really discouraging a lot of times, but we're the ones who are keeping this stuff going, and no, we don't get enough credit for it. Never will, and that's not really the point. But things like this and communicating with each other and having each other's back and growing our community, that's what's most important. And I really appreciate you guys and everything you do too. So thanks again for having me on.